Do you know how to accurately compare different pet foods? And did you know that the guaranteed analysis is actually not a very good way to do that? The reason for that is the guaranteed analysis is influenced by both the caloric density of the diet and the moisture content of the diet. I know a lot of people will convert that number to a dry matter basis and try to compare diets, but the truth is that number even is not 100% accurate because it doesn't take into account caloric density or how much food your pet has to consume in order to get a certain amount of protein or fat or carbohydrates. So today I'm going to give you a tutorial on how to figure that out. And don't worry, if you don't like doing math and you don't want to set up your own spreadsheet, I will actually be giving a walkthrough of a spreadsheet that I've already created that does all of these calculations for you along with some of the extras. So we are going to go ahead and compare 4 different pet foods. So I tried to keep kind of 2 popular foods that maybe people know of. I have the Blue Buffalo Life Protection Formula. We're going to do Purina Pro Plan Bright Minds, the turkey and whole wheat macaroni, Just Food for Dogs, and then we're going to do the wholesome grains from Stella and Chewy, and kind of compare how these diets differ from each other as far as on a macronutrient standpoint. Now this isn't really the only way to compare pet foods, but this is kind of stage 1 of comparing pet foods. I like to think of foods and choosing a food from your dog as coming in 2 stages. One is you find the foods that fit your dog's macronutrient needs, and then you take the second step to kind of basically interview those pet food companies to figure out which one you feel most comfortable feeding your dog and kind of making sure that they fit within your budget. So we're going to go ahead and compare these 4 foods as a example so you guys can understand how you might compare foods and why the guaranteed analysis isn't really a good way to compare these foods. I'm going to be using a tool that I have created. This is actually something that you can download on my blog. I'll make sure to link it below, but it's an Excel spreadsheet and it does more than just macros here. It is actually going to help you with understanding the amount of grams of protein that your pet needs and how much you're feeding and what your dog's caloric needs are as well. So it does a little bit beyond just macros, but we are going to use it for macros today. So let's start with this Blue Buffalo formula. So this is the adult chicken and brown rice formula. Now if I go down on here and I click on guaranteed analysis, it's going to give me these numbers. So 24% crude protein, 14% fat, 5% fiber, and 10% moisture. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in here. So 24, 14, fiber was 5. Ash, if it's not listed, which it is not in this formula here, we are going to just assume that since it's a dry formula, it's about 7, and then moisture was 10. And next, we're going to look for the kcals per kg. Now, kcals per kg is sometimes not on here. It may be under feeding amount instead. Most of them will list it. So here it's 3,613 kcals per kg. So this is the caloric density of this diet. So 3613, and then I can add the kcals per cup. We don't really need it actually for the calculations though, so I'm just going to leave it how it is. But if you wanted to know how much to feed of your dog's calories, you would actually want to do that for this sheet. So it's going to go ahead and give us the estimated dry matter. So dry matter and caloric distribution are going to basically account for the moisture content of this diet. Estimated nutrient density is going to account for both the caloric density that we inputted here, and it's going to account for the amount of moisture within the diet. So it does both. And then I give you these general guidelines here so you understand what is low, moderate, and high as far as protein, fat, and carbs for different dogs. You would need to know what your dog's macronutrient needs to really understand and utilize this effectively, other than to compare diets saying this one's low and this one's high. If you don't know if your dog needs low or high, then this isn't going to be super helpful. But if you have those standards, this can be very, very nice to compare diets. So I'm going to go ahead and save these numbers, and then we're going to go to the next food. Our next food that we're going to be comparing is the Purina Pro Plan Bright Minds Adult 7+. This is a turkey and brown rice entree, so it comes in this little container here. We are going to go on nutrition and then go to the guaranteed analysis. So guaranteed analysis, we have 12, 3, 1.5, and then 75% as far as moisture. So we'll go ahead and input those numbers to start. So up here, 12, 3, 1.5, since this is a wet food, we're going to go with 1% ash and then 75% moisture. Now we need to go find that caloric density again. Usually it's under feeding. So 1080 is our caloric density. We'll put that in here. And again, I'm going to ignore this because it doesn't affect these calculations for now. And then we can see here, and one thing I want to note right away is you look at the protein amount. So even though this guaranteed analysis for the Blue Buffalo actually showed, oh my goodness, the guaranteed analysis for Blue Buffalo actually showed 24% protein. The Purina Pro Plan, which was significantly less on the guaranteed analysis 12, it actually has gram-wise per calorie fed significantly more protein. So again, I'm going to go ahead and take these numbers and save it so that we can compare them at the very end between all of these different diets. Our next food that we're going to be comparing is going to be the Just Food for Dogs turkey and whole wheat macaroni diet. So this is a fresh food diet. And then down here it has the guaranteed analysis. So it gives us the kcals per kg and then the guaranteed analysis here. So this is 11, 4, 1, and then 69%. So we're going to go up here again and we are going to type in 11, 4, 1. So 11, 4, 1, again, leave the ash how it is, and then 69, and then we're going to look here for the caloric density, 1728, and then we're going to get numbers, and you see this wet food diet is actually significantly less protein, so 72 grams per 1,000 kilocalories. So I'm going to go ahead and grab these numbers, and we're going to move on to the Stella and Chewy's last. Now our last diet that we're comparing is going to be the Stella and Chewy's Essential Wholesome Grains. This is the beef and ancient grains recipe. So I'm going to go down again to find that guaranteed analysis. So this is 24, 16, 5, and then 12. So we're going to go ahead and enter that in here. So 24, 16, 5, and then we're going to switch this over to 7 because it is a dry food, and then 12, and I'm just going to double check those numbers. All right, and then our caloric density on here is going to be 3770. So 3770, and then we got our numbers here again, and we're looking at our protein, fat, and carbs on our nutrient density, and then we can also see our dry matter values. I'm going to grab these, and then I'll pull up all 4 diets so we can compare them and kind of talk about them in comparison to what the guaranteed analysis is, so that you can understand how these numbers might be influenced a little bit. Okay, so a couple of things I wanted to highlight comparing all 4 of these different diets. So the first thing that I wanted to highlight was that the Stella and Chewy, if you had just compared by dry matter, the Stella and Chewy, to this Blue Buffalo Life Protection Formula, the dry matter content on both of these is very, very similar. We see this one's 27%. 27% on protein. But when we look at the actual grams of protein, it's actually a little bit different. Now, the reason for that is because of caloric density. The Blue Buffalo diet is actually less calorically dense than the Stella and Chewy's diet, which means that it's more nutrient dense. So it's kind of an opposites effect there. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that the guaranteed analysis of this Purina Pro Plan and the Just Food for Dogs turkey and mac had both of these as less than like 20% of the guaranteed analysis protein as being there, versus when you actually look at the protein values when we're looking at estimated nutrient density, they actually are both higher in protein than the dry diets that you were looking at. Now, does your dog need that much protein? You would need to actually discuss what your dog's nutrient needs are and how much they're eating in order to decide that. But in the general purposes of comparing diets, moisture content and caloric density can influence these numbers and make it so that a diet may offer more or less of something. The other thing to keep in mind especially when you're looking at fat content, say your dog is sensitive to fat, is that these 2 diets, the Just Food for Dogs turkey and mac and the Purina Pro Plan's Bright Minds, both had very small numbers, like less than 10% on the guaranteed analysis for their fat content, which if you talk to a vet, they'll say like, oh, you need to look at foods less than 10% fat because your dog has pancreatitis. Well, what they didn't, or maybe didn't clarify, is that they meant that on a dry matter basis, and neither of the diets here would be appropriate for your dog. They're not actually appropriate as a low-fat diet. So if we look at the Stella and Chewy, it was very obvious that it was a high-fat diet. Same with the Blue Buffalo, but the Purina Pro Plans by Bright Minds also is a moderate fat diet. The Turkey and Mac is also, I would say, lower in fat actually, so maybe for mild pancreatitis, but still not as fat restrictive as many of those prescription diets that your vet is going to recommend. So still may not be appropriate for some dogs with need those really low fat numbers. So when we look at diets and we compare them, that guaranteed analysis is really just the starting point, and then we need to do additional calculations in order to compare these diets accurately. And then when you know your pet's nutritional needs, you can use these numbers to actually see if a diet fits or not. So if you're looking at dry matter content, or if you're looking at nutrient density, personally, nutrient density I think is the most accurate way to look at it because it takes into account both moisture content and caloric density. And then we can even use those numbers to make more advanced calculations. And this is something that I wanted to show you guys within the sheet itself. So when we do look at these diets and we want to see the amount consumed, so say I go back to the Stella and Chewy's, which was our last diet. Now it's 384 kcals per cup. I'll put that in here, 384 kcals per cup, and then I'm going to finish filling out this sheet for a 50-pound dog right now, and it calculates out caloric needs. Now say my dog is maybe moderately active, so I'm going to put that the total calories per day are 1,166. This is going to tell me the 90-10 split, so how much needs to come from my balanced diet versus how much can come from treats. Then down here, it's actually going to calculate out what that 90% amount is. Now, if I put 278 grams, or I put 2.75 for the amount, it's going to give me how much protein my dog is consuming. And then at the very end of the sheet, it's actually going to tell me how much protein my dog needs, and if my dog's protein needs are met with the amount fed. So here, if I compare, my dog's protein needs are about 67, or I'm getting about 67 grams from the diet, and I compare that to a healthy adult dog. Healthy adult dog needs at least between 45 to 56, so protein needs are met at the amount fed. Now say my dog was actually being fed a lot less, so right at resting energy requirements, which would be more like the obese prone lab. Now my dog is getting significantly less food, and I'm going to just use the grams here because I don't want to have to put that over here. Now I look at the grams of protein that my dog is getting from this diet. So now my dog's only consuming about 42 grams. Now if I look at the healthy adult dog, that's actually below what a healthy adult dog needs as far as protein on a regular basis to maintain muscle mass is what's recommended. It is above the NRC minimum for dogs, but if your dog is adult active and we want to help maintain muscle mass, we probably want a little bit more. So these are just things that this sheet does. And again, I do have this sheet as a download on my blog. I will put the link below so that you guys can go ahead and access that if this is something that you're interested in. If not, I will also include a link to a blog post that has how to do all of these calculations so that you can basically create your own Excel spreadsheet